right, it's the first Tuesday of the month, so you must be at First Tuesdays. Thanks for getting here. If you're in the wrong place, you might as well stay. Good place to be. I'm Mick Dumke, 2 seats over.
I'm Ben Joravsky from The Reader, and he's from the Sun-Times.
That's right.
And before we introduce our distinguished guests, and I want to note that we have 2 distinguished previous guests, as Tim said, Karen Lewis, but Troy LaRaviere, who blew the place up in May, so to speak, is over there. So when the evening was over, people were begging Troy to run for mayor. So if
you're probably glad you don't have that job right this moment.
I don't know what's worse, being a mayor or a principal. Okay, well put. But before we introduce, I just want to remind everybody again that very slowly we're building our website. It's slowly coming together. It's called First Tuesdays Chicago, and as we speak, there's just people working overtime trying to get it up. I think we have on it the Troy Karen show from May, which was a great show, by the way. And last January, this past month's show, where the great Carol Marine was here and Mary Ann Ahern, which was a great show.
Yeah, and I was just talking with a guest about our show from November when Steve Brown, the longtime spokesman for Michael Madigan, was our guest, along with Politico ace reporter Natasha Karecki. Yes, Steve Brown did show up.
He showed up.
Yeah. One thing I'll say about Steve Brown, and I said the same thing when he was here, so I'm not
talking behind his back.
Yeah, I am talking behind his back, but I'm saying the same thing I would say to his face. He always returns calls, and when he says he's going to get back to you, he does. Now, what he actually has to say, sometimes that's a whole other issue. There's usually not much to it, but I give the man credit. He does return calls, and in this business, and you guys have always returned our calls, which is why you're here. Thank you for returning this call. But that goes a long way, so we appreciate that. Anyway, I think Ben's trying to make a point that, and it's a great crowd, because when Ben says we're slowly building a website, everyone starts laughing. We love you too; it's great. But we are trying to do this, and we want you to be able to see shows. If you came and you saw something, you thought it was great, you're like, did he really see that? Did he really say that? You can go back and look at some of our past shows. If you weren't able to make it, you can still check it out. And we're not there. We don't have every show up yet. We still have to get, among others, Dick Mell, who was our very first show, one of our first guests. And it was a great performance by Dick Mell. We have to use the word performance. Afterward, someone came up to us and said, I think half the things he said were indictable.
Yeah, no.
So just so you guys know, the bar here is very high. The bar here is very high. But we thank all you guys for being here. And as Ben, before I jumped in and cut him off, was trying to say, we have this slowly evolving website, and we hope you'll check that out along the way, too.
So why don't you introduce our guests?
Let's do that. Sitting immediately to, it's to my right, I guess it's to your left or something like that, is 6th Ward Alderman Roderick Sawyer. All right, that's when we welcome him. Thank you. And next to Ben is 8th District Representative LaShawn Ford. I just so you guys know, I stayed up all night trying to memorize those numbers so I could get them right. So that part went smoothly. We like to start here by finding out a little bit who you guys are. We've seen things about you. We know Representative Ford about the recall legislation, the mayoral recall legislation you recently introduced. Alderman Sawyer, we know you're the leader of the City Council's Black Caucus, among other things. But how did you guys get to this esteemed place right now? Now, tell us a little bit, LaShawn, how did you get into politics? I know you have a really compelling personal story. So tell us.
Well, first I have to say, thanks for having me. But if you want me to stay, you can't bring up the word indictment ever again while I'm here. And so can we have an agreement there? So, I mean, I used to work as a teacher for the Chicago Public Schools. I was a teacher at Bridge Elementary School, and I started my real estate company, and I went on, and during the good times that people had in real estate, and I built a good business, and then I independently ran for state rep 3 times. Won on the 3rd time, and I've been independent ever since.
Your district's on the west side.
The west side, Austin, and my district covers Austin, LaGrange Park, North Riverside, Oak Park, and Berwyn. Yeah.
You're big in Berwyn.
Big Hurt is there too, so.
So, do you want to briefly discuss why the word indictment should not be mentioned on the stage?
You can. You know, I was indicted on 17 counts, and it's a part of my life, so I don't mind talking about it. I beat the feds and on 17 counts of bank fraud. And so I'm going to forever talk about it. It cost me a lot of money, but you know what? I fought for my freedom, and I'm willing to talk about it because I knew that I was innocent, and I fought, and I didn't succumb to their pressures of making me go to jail for 48 months, and that was the first time, the first plea that they wanted. Then they wanted me to take 36 months. Then they wanted me to do 24 months. Then just give us anything. Just take a felony and just go to jail, and everything will be okay, So, and I didn't. I fought a great attorney, Tom Durkin, and here I am today, still fighting and having a recall for the mayor of the city of Chicago.
Well, we'll get to the recall. But then first, let's hear from Alderman Sawyer. I would assume that most people in this room are old enough, well, maybe I shouldn't make that assumption, to know that your father was mayor of the city of Chicago from 1987 to 1989. And so did you what?
That sound, maybe everybody didn't know.
Was that sounds of appreciation for the Sawyer reign or disappointment with what followed? I guess so. I guess before I get to the real question I want to ask you, let's talk a little bit about how you first got into office. You didn't immediately follow your father to 6th Ward. As I recall, there was a few aldermen in between. Am I correct on that?
No, actually, I fought it tooth and nail. Although it was always in me. Politics was always in me, just the service portion of it. But I did fight it for a while. The first time I ran back in 1992, fresh out of law school, bright-eyed and thinking the world was there for me to take. And I got a real good lesson from Mike Madigan at that time. I ran for state rep in 92 against someone who's now one of my senior advisors and my next-door neighbor, Charles Morrow. And the district ran such as it ran east and west. And Madigan had a significant portion of the district where the bulk of the votes came. And back when I ran it the first time, it was my understanding that Charles was going to move up to the Senate spot became open. And there was always a buzz about him running for that Senate spot that left that state rep spot open. So I said, I'm going to jump into the state rep spot. And I was still kind of full of juice. It was after my dad left office. And I'm still a little angry and still a little, hopped up. Like I said, literally fresh out of law school. So I decided I was going to run. Mr. Morrow decided to change his mind, run for his seat for re-election, did not run for the Senate seat. And I stayed in the race and thoroughly got my ass whipped. And I got beat. I got beat soundly. And I remember one day, on election day, I was out in the 13th Ward campaigning, canvassing last minute. And the precinct captain told me, he said, "You seem like a nice young man. I'm going to tell you this. I've been a precinct captain for all these many years. You see these people, I know everybody on these blocks, the next block, the next block. You're wasting your time over here. Why don't you take your stuff and go somewhere where you might have a shot? You seem like a good guy, but you're not going to win this one." And he was right. I did not win. And I spent my time, I decided to go ahead and practice law and, establish a practice in my neighborhood right on 75th Street, and did that for a while. But I stayed involved in the community. I was always involved in every community activity that went on in my neighborhood. I was there. I was there for many, many years. People asked me, "You gonna run? You gonna run?" No, I'm gonna try to make a little money. And the money part was not in me either, right? You know, the hardest thing for me to do when I was practicing law is to ask for money. I could not do it. I was bad at it. To this day, people owe me so much money, you know, and I did work for them and never collected money from. So I ultimately, in 2011, it came up, you know, and I saw that there was an opening. I saw that people were thoroughly dissatisfied with the current administration, and although I knew her very well and know her very well, I saw an opening, and I said, if I didn't do this, someone else would, and I took a shot, and I was successful.
I see. And so that was 2011.
2011.
And were you supported by most of the unions then, or
I was supported by no one.
No one. Okay.
No one at that time.
And you beat.
Fredrina Lyle was
Lyle.
relatively well respected. She sort of had walked that line.
Very
in the city
intelligent
council.
person. I mean, but personality-wise, she was hard to deal with based on talking to people. But I had a fair relationship with her. I did work in the ward. I worked on a couple of committees that she had, and I refused to run the first couple of times that she ran, and I stood down. I even asked my dad to do a commercial for her in 2003 maybe, or 2007, one of the two.
Yeah.
And he did it, and she continued to be successful, but that last time I just saw that she was not going to win.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you went for it.
And how does a conversation go? When you break the news to someone you've known and worked with, and you say, hey, by the way, Fredrina, I'm going to take your seat.
It's not a pleasant conversation, but and we did have that, and it's funny, we did have that conversation.
Where did it happen?
Oh gosh, I think we were on might have been around her office on 75th Street, and we ran into each other. No, you know what? I take that back. It was in front of my house.
So it was
during a block club party. You know, it was a block club party.
On the street.
On the street.
Witnesses.
She was coming by, visiting the block club party. I had a line of people bringing me petitions. Coming, because I had made the decision to run, and people were just bringing me petitions left and right, and we walked off, and we had that conversation. I said, I got to do this, Freddie. I have to run. I think that this is that time, and if I don't do it now, I'll never do it. And I think I can be successful. And, it's nothing personal, but I think I'm going to beat you. And, we had some words back and forth. They weren't unpleasant, but they were terse, and they were a little edgy, but we were both respectful.
Not
right.
Tim Tutton terse.
No, you're right.
Terse.
Wait, now.
Right.
Now, this is what I was going to raise. The Sawyer name may have actually been a liability when you were starting out in the early 90s because, and this is for the young people in the room, there was a ferocious fight in '89 in '87, right after Harold Washington died. There were two factions.
No, it was '89.
No, 87 was when Harold died.
When Harold died.
Yeah, and there were two factions in the city council. One supported Tim Evans, who's now a judge. Fredrina Lyle's a judge, too.
Yes.
I think we're all going to be judges. You were supporting her?
Well, no, she's running on the post.
Okay, that's the best way to run. Right. So one faction supported Tim Evans, and another faction supported Eugene Sawyer, and I contend that that bitter fight, most of which took place in the black community, has led to 30 years of what we've had subsequently of...
Unfortunately, you're absolutely correct.
Yes. I know. Isn't it unfortunate when I'm correct? It's like bad. You know what I mean? Oh, unfortunately, you're right for once.
But, I mean, you're absolutely correct. And the problem was, and we had that fight, and what makes that fight that much worse is when the infighting was going on and the ultimate election in December, that night in December when he got elected.
Wait, you're talking about when the city council elected Eugene Sawyer.
My dad, yes.
Okay, over Tim. There was
over Tim.
Yeah.
I guess, should I back up a little bit? Because I figured
well, just so everybody knows,
right?
the city council, after Harold died, the city council met and they decided, I forget what the vote was, but Eugene Sawyer Rod Sawyer's father was elected mayor of Chicago for 2 years, and then there was a special election.
Yes.
This is when the
And that's what I wanted to talk about was the special election portion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say the aforementioned Dick Mell stood on his counter during
table.
this meeting, right?
Yeah. Do you remember this?
Now,
Yeah.
without belaboring the whole point about the details of what happened, but the interesting part about what occurred after that was during the course, December 1st, my dad got elected amongst the city council members. Prior to that, my father was ready to retire in '87, and I guess I can tell this story now. In '87,
This never heard.
this never heard in public. Never, absolutely. This is the first time I heard in public. 1987, early 1987, beginning of the year, my dad had bought a Mercedes. You know, politicians back then never bought foreign cars. My dad was ready to retire. He said, "This is my last go. I was about to, I'm leaving." You know, I put in my time. You know, I put in good time. It was my dad had served at that point 71, almost 17 years. And he was ready to, to move on. You know, salary back then was, I think, $27,000 a year. I mean, he was ready to really earn a living. You know, he figured he put in his time, and it's time for him to move on. I was in law school at the time. I was about to start law school in '87. We had talked about this because he knew I had an interest in politics ever since I was a child. I was the son that was really wanted to follow in his father's footsteps. So we had talked about it. My dad was going to resign in 1990 when I graduated from law school. He was going to resign. I was going to be appointed. Then I would have run as an incumbent in 1991. That was the arrangement that we talked about back then. And, it was not uncommon for that to occur. But, I mean, if we're going to be honest, that was, but it was much more prevalent then. But I figured, I went to law school. I was active in the community. Even then, I was very active, but I would have, probably be ready to retire about now, right? Long since gone. But Harold died. There was an intervening act that occurred that delayed my election to city council by some 20 years. So Harold died. But all my dad wanted to do at that point was fill out Harold's agenda, serve out his term. He did not want to run again. He had no interest in running for re-election. He gave that to everybody, let everyone know. The funny part about that was the white faction was like, fine. You can serve out Harold's term. Serve until, that was '87, till '91. We don't have a problem with that. A black man filed suit forcing the special runoff. Even though the law was on the books, no one was interested in enforcing it. They were like, we're going to let that slide. We're going to let you serve the term.
Well, see, that was, okay, now I don't want to relive a fight that's like
Yeah.
30 years old.
Well, I mean, that's what occurred.
But
so.
that was the fear,
Yeah.
was that your father was allowing himself to be used by the Burt Mel faction, you know what I'm saying, and that they would usher someone in '91. But he ran for re-election.
Furthermore, he ran in a special because he still wanted to finish out Harold's term.
I see, okay.
He had informed Alderman Evans at that time that he would throw all his support and financial support behind him. You can have this race. I just want to finish out. There were a lot of things that Harold had not finished when he had passed. Yeah. The Human Rights Ordinance, contracts for police and fire. There was a lot that was still left open. Lights at Wrigley Field, that at the time were unpopular, but my dad finished all those things in the 15 months he served. He still finished those things that Harold started because, we had the council wars and we couldn't get a lot accomplished. In '87, we finally unbroke that tie with the help of Commissioner Garcia being elected, getting on there and helped make that change to get some votes done. But at that time, there was still a lot that was unaccomplished that Harold Washington wanted to have accomplished. My dad wanted to finish that and be done with it. And fortunately, he was able to do it in the short time he had. But I think had he had that full 3.5 years, could accomplish all the things that Harold wanted to get done.
Well, he obviously did, and he lost in '89 to Daley, and then Daley held until Rahm, and Rahm won re-election. This is my long-winded way of getting to your recall proposal. So Where did that emerge from, and is that intended to drive Rahm from office?
No, it's just good public policy, and I think that we should have it. And that's what it is. I think we did the recall in 2010 for the Illinois governor, and so now we have that on the books. We could recall Rauner right now if people want to go and work for it. But we don't have good public policy for the city of Chicago. And of course, you know, if you want to ask my personal opinion, I mean, the city has a lot of problems. And me as an African American, I feel totally disrespected by this mayor. And so he may think that a little state rep doesn't have any power to do anything to hurt him. But I tell you, this is a tool that I think is necessary to deal with this mayor. Whether some people think that it will apply to a sitting mayor or not, it's still a tool that we could use in this city if he's reelected, or if we decide to move forward and pass this bill, and he would have to fight to stay in if someone takes this to court and decides that we want this law to apply to him.
Well, is there any chance that this bill will actually be called for a vote? I mean, this bill will be debated, or is this bill to be buried?
Well,
never
I mean,
heard from?
We're celebrating Black History Month right now, and you know all the things that Black families have overcome. So this is just a simple bill to recall the mayor of the city of Chicago. So I think it's very positive.
How do you feel, how specifically do you feel disrespected by the mayor? What do you mean by that exactly?
So I live on the west side of Chicago. I was born in Cabrini, moved to the west side of Chicago, Austin community, and I know for a fact that the mayor of the city of Chicago wouldn't live in Austin. And if you are a public servant, you're going to do everything that you can to make sure that life is better for those that need better opportunities. And on the west side of Chicago, Madam President knows that there were at least 7 schools or more closed in Austin. There are schools that's being turned around in Austin. I don't know where they're being turned around to, but things are not getting better. Businesses are scarce. Unemployment is high. Crime is high. And, you know, when there's political will to fix problems, problems are fixed. And I need someone that has a strong political will to make life better for the people on the west side of Chicago. It'll make everyone's life better here in this community, and he doesn't have that will. And to listen to the mayor give his speech at city council and say that he was surprised when he had a conversation with an African-American young man that he wasn't treated like a white person, that's a shame. How could you represent a city when you're not sure how your people are being treated? It just doesn't make sense. And so I think that the mayor is the mayor for the big, and we need a mayor in this city that understands the struggles of working people. And he's definitely not that.
Do you think he actually had that conversation? I know the quote you're talking about is like one of these. I remember another one where he looked at a kid and there was like he describes like a lost look in the kid's eye. Do you think he actually had a conversation with a?
I think he did. I mean, that's the type of stuff that we get as African Americans. We get him to come into our community and come around and take pictures, and he gets talking points from Black people, but he doesn't bring anything to really improve the quality of life. And so that's the problem. I mean, yes, he's been there, and he's found out that, I mean, he's had at least two terms to campaign in Black communities. That's where he's get put over the top. And so he sees it.
And yet, it's the same question I asked Karen when she was on stage. And yet, he won over 50% of the Black vote. He won over 50% of the West Side Black vote. What's that all about?
I don't know, but I think that this is, like I said, this is Black History Month, and we're fighting right now for to make the Voter Right Act explicitly stated in the U.S. Constitution. And we know that when you look at Ferguson, Ferguson knew that they had to elect more African Americans to the city council if they were going to be represented. So what did they do? The last election, they elected 2 new African Americans to their city council, and now it's up to them to make sure that the elected officials that serving them meet their needs. But this is a democracy, and not saying that, you know, brother, that you can't represent me. I think you can. But you have to have the will, and you have to understand the people that you are elected to represent. And I don't think the people in Ferguson understood the African Americans that they were representing. They were just there to be in power. Mm-hmm. And so that's what the voting, I think people have to understand that voting is really power, and we have to make sure that we vote our interests.
Okay.
I'm always the guy on the stage who ends up defending Rahm, and it's very uncomfortable.
Well, don't worry, I'll get Mayor Daley on you, and he's got something to tell you.
All right, this isn't really a defense of Rahm, but playing devil's advocate here. Well, what is Rahm supposed to do? A lot of the stuff you're talking about, LaShawn, and the same is true in at least lots of parts of the 6th Ward. This has been true for decades. And so Rahm, while he has been elected to his 2nd term, he's been in there for 5 years. Has there been any change at all? What should he do? And then throwing out there are African-American elected officials, and it's not just up to them, but where are their voices? You know, where are their voices in all this? Where is the city council in all this? I mean, so start with you, LaShawn.
Well, a good representative understands, and you go straight for your weakest link in order to make things better for your city, because your weakest link pulls everyone down. So we already know that the city of Chicago, I think that everyone should have what they want. I don't want to redistribute funds and take away from people that shouldn't have, but you have to make sure that you take care of things that need to be taken care of. If there's a roof leaking, you fix it, or there's a problem. It's going to cost you more. You don't build a river walk that's going to cost you millions and millions of dollars. That makes no sense. So that money that was spent on the Riverwalk could have been put into struggling communities. You know, you don't build a new DePaul Stadium, $100 million. So the focus has to be on the problem. And I understand this is supposed to be a world-class city, but the only way it could be a world-class city if the world sees that everyone is treated fairly. And I don't think that the world would agree that this is a world-class city.
Well, following up on what he's saying, do you think the changes that we've seen in the city, if they are real or just momentary things, do you think that's going to force the city council to do some of the redirection that LaShawn's talking about, maybe forcing the mayor to spend TIF money a little differently than the way he's spending it, or to negotiate a little tougher with the banks on the swap deals, et cetera?
I believe so, and this is why. Right now, the mayor is in a quite vulnerable position, and I'll back up. You know, coming into 2015, I was not a mayoral supporter. It's not everybody knows that, who knows me. I was not, but coming into the beginning of 2015 after the election, and then after the subsequent runoff, I had several conversations with the mayor that I had never had during my first 4 years in office. I had more conversations with the mayor in a month than I had in the entire 4 years in office. But he decided to want to reach out to me, and we talked. And even then, I told him that in order for you to, to make this thing right, you're going to have to make significant investments in black and brown areas that you have not made before. Downtown is beautiful. We all get that. Downtown is one of the most beautiful places in the world. We understand that. But where we need the resources, and I'll take my area, for example, which I don't have a lot of TIF resources. I don't have an abundance of TIFs in my area. For a variety of reasons, but right now we don't have it. So,
and describe the 6th. Sorry to interrupt, but describe where the 6th Ward is.
6th Ward is on the south side of Chicago, and it comprises a variety of neighborhoods, from well to decent middle class to struggling. So that includes the areas of Chatham, small part of Auburn Gresham, small part of Chesterfield, and a pretty decent portion of Inglewood, and Greater Grand Crossing, which is where I live, in Park Manor. So I have areas where I live in are decent middle-class areas, and I have areas that are struggling. But in all my areas, including my area in Chatham, which is the area that is pretty decent, has not been any active economic activity for over 20 years. So neighborhoods have leapfrogged over us in the interest of where there's TIF money available, in the interest of economic development, new stores, new shops, restaurants. One of the most frustrating things that I can tell you right now, if I want to have this event gathering here in my ward, I don't have a place to have it. If I want to invite you to have a beer and a burger and watch a game, I don't have one sports bar. I don't have a significant number of restaurants in my area. I don't have child play areas. And Rich, we talked about this before. And I don't have those things. And I said, these are things I have to have in my neighborhood. And to his credit, I'll throw a bone out here through this. He has assisted us with providing us the first ever community development corporation in Chatham ever. And it's about to be announced very soon, called the Greater Chatham Initiative. And you know, he's got some of his friends who are philanthropists that have money to help invest, which we really appreciate. We do appreciate. But we have to catch up to other neighborhoods, the other 76 neighborhoods. We have to catch up because we're far behind. Because when I talked about my area, I always called it stagnant. And it's just nothing had occurred over many years. It's not that it's bad, it's just has not improved. So I need that jump start in my area. And right now, he's in the position to make it happen. And in results of the council, I believe that the council has started to become more emboldened as of late. And I'm hoping, and this, one of the things that he was really shocked at when I became chairman of the Black Caucus, he had no idea that I was even interested in that, because he thought I had no interest in the Black Caucus or whatever. He just thought I was sticking with the Progressive Caucus and dealing with that, which I'm a very active member as well. But he didn't think that the blacks and progressives had anything in common, in his mindset, right? And at that time, but so when he called me and he found out I won the election to the chairman of the Black Caucus, and my effort is to try to bring these progressive ideals to the Black Caucus, because most of the things that the Progressive Caucus talks about affects mostly black and brown people anyway. They do. So my goal in working with the Black Caucus is to, one, make us that strong council, weak mayor form of government that we're supposed to have. And now we have my colleagues are starting to be more emboldened, start speaking out a little bit more. You know, it's not where I want it to be yet, but I think that together we will form a coalition that will, because we're the largest single caucus in the city council, it's 18 members. You know, my father taught me one thing about politics, taught me to learn how to count. 26 votes get you where you need to be in city council. Black Caucus, we have 18. If you take the 5 blacks out of the Progressive Caucus, there are 9 more. Theoretically, we have votes that we can do it with, even not adding the Latino caucus. I heard someone, which is a very good idea. Between those 3 caucuses, we control the council. Or we have the ability to control the council. Let me say that. Well, so and my mindset is, and it's nothing against the mayor. This has nothing to do that's anti-mayor, pro-mayor, whatever. It's just that it's us being able to do our job effectively is to start establishing relationships. And the other thing my father told me, he taught me 2 things besides learning how to count. Told me to make friends because enemies come on their own. So those 2 things about politics I take to heart, and I make friends. I try to go across on the other side of the street, up here, up north. I have friends all over the city, and I want to make friends and make sure that I have alliances with other people because our problems are all the same.
Okay. And I got to say, we talked about issues for the black and brown, but I got to tell you, anytime you have a system where $500 and almost $50 million have been paid in police misconduct, that affects everyone in this city. That's why your property taxes are going up, because the city must pay things like that and pay lawsuits like the Laquan McDonald, $5 million. Those things are affecting everyone in the city. So it may seem like only The black and brown communities are struggling, but every community could be better if only we had a fair system.
Well, the city just borrowed like $75 million to buy back all the rights to the Orange Line, which were quietly sold under Mayor Daley.
Yeah.
It's a whole other story.
You could just
Someone wanted to ask you, Alderman Sawyer, is there was a big he actually sold the Green Line too while we're at it. I'm not kidding. He sold the rights to these.
And yet he still would be elected mayor if he would run forever. So anyway, I always like to say that of Chicago electorate.
Well, I wanted to ask. I wanted to throw this out there though. How does the Black Caucus operate, or the Progressive Caucus? How do aldermen operate if you try to be independent? I'm going to ask you this in the context of this information. The big 3,000-page email dump that the administration did on New Year's Eve, where they released literally volumes on when they thought people weren't looking, volumes of emails related to the Laquan McDonald video release and the days that followed. In those emails, there is a bunch of correspondence where they discuss who can we get out there to speak for us. And it's essentially like, what African-American face can we call on to go before the cameras to speak out for us? And there's at least a couple emails where they talk about, can we get the statement ready for the Black Caucus? Like they're trying to craft some sort of media statement they're hoping you're going to use. And so what I'm asking here, Alderman, is, like, what kind of pressures do you get those kind of pressures? Is it sort of like, this is how we want you to vote, these are your talking points?
No.
How does this actually work?
No, actually, that's the first time I've heard that. Seriously, they did not come to me with that, put it that way. When we came out regarding the Laquan McDonald case, back in April, for example, I was not on finance at the time, but I did receive a call directly from Steve Patton and told me the situation that occurred. And the next day, the chairman of the Black Caucus at the time, Howard Brookins, did release a statement asking for the release of the tape. The press obviously did not. There was a small press release because Howard did find it and someone did report it, but it was maybe on page 35 in a small column somewhere. It was not public knowledge. It was, maybe, right, exactly. It was somewhere in a small column somewhere.
So no one reads it.
But we did, as a caucus, speak out and say that we demanded the release of the tape. But people blame us for that. But we did say that. Nobody picked it up. The mainstream press never picked it up.
And that statement by Howard was circulated among mayoral aides, too. There was alarm that statement had been issued by the head of the Black Caucus. It was like, sort of like, did you see this? And so that was passed.
I didn't know that either. I got to go read those emails.
You really do.
But we did make a statement, and then our chairman at the time made the statement, but no one picked it up, so they felt that we just didn't say anything about it, but we did. And the press didn't pick it up, and, they did inform us that the officer at the time, we didn't know who the officer was, but they said that the officer was going to be indicted based on the information that they gave us. And we just made that assumption that the state's attorney was going to soon, like any day now, indict this gentleman for the crime that he had committed, the heinous crime that he had committed, executing a child on the street that had no imminent threat to him. But yet, 6 months went on after that, 7 months went on after that, and there was no indictment. We did come out again demanding the resignation of Superintendent McCarthy. They were a little salty about that.
And what do you mean by that? How is a salty attitude delivered to you?
They asked for a meeting with the Black Caucus right after we did that. And the great thing about that, that's one of the, because I had just became chairman. I've been chairman a couple of months, and I was kind of worried about how it was going to go. And we were at during budget season. And we were hearing about the McDonald and a few other things about the statement he made regarding the Dante Servin officer, and we were just frustrated. We were like, well, what are we going to do? One of my members stated that we should ask for his resignation. I said, well, hold on, okay, if you want to do that, let's meet right now. We went to an anteroom. We just grabbed a room. Everybody, come in the room. If we're going to do this, we're going to do this right now. Nobody leaves. Get everybody down here right now. We're going to make this statement. You cannot leave. Everybody's going to be right here. I don't know if Joanna's in here or not. I can't see in the dark, but no. But Joanna Klonsky, who works with me on the media, I called Joanna right away. She was happened to be across the street. I said, Joanna, I need you right here, right now. And Joanna, my chief of staff, Brian Sleet, put together a statement in a matter of 20 minutes. She made a press release. She did the call-outs. We had a press conference in a matter of 45 minutes, ready to go. And we called that on, but everybody stood with us, for the most part, almost everybody.
Yeah.
But
that's even faster than the city council approved the parking meter.
But I wasn't there for that, so I'm not claiming that one. Right. But I mean, I was happy that we were able to do that as a caucus, and everybody stood firm, and it resulted in, and I'm not saying that solved all our problems. Obviously, it didn't. But what I was impressed with, that we all stood firm on an issue, and we all stood there together, and we made that statement, and we stood by that statement, and we continued on until the ultimate termination of Superintendent McCarthy. So we were happy about that. But it's not over.
Well,
it's not nearly over. We have to stop the culture, and that's the real problem. So when people talk about, the new superintendent search and all these things, right now, whether it's a black person, a white person, male, female, until we can address and put an end to the blue wall, the culture of the police department, we're just going to get another Gary McCarthy, whoever. You start naming the past superintendents who weren't. I'm not saying they were all bad, but it's still that wall. When you can say that Dante Servin didn't do anything wrong when he shot, when they shot in the air and killed a young lady for no reason, that's something wrong.
And this is the Rakia Boyd
shooting. The Rakia Boyd shooting, absolutely. When there was, the one officer who got indicted, shoots a child in the street, and a half a dozen or more officers stand around and just say nothing or corroborate the story that was given, that's something wrong. Something's wrong with that. And how do we fix that? That's what we need to figure out.
I think how you fix it is, you have to fix it with consequences. And I think that Madam President Karen Lewis is saying, Mayor Lewis is saying, we have to punish them. You have to make sure that we could talk about culture, but you're right. We got to change it. But a bad person knows that if they do wrong, that they will pay the cost. That's how you fix the culture. You make sure that there are consequences. You have a meeting with the mayor, and you have a meeting with the state's attorney and the FBI, and you say that if you lay out rules, consequences for actions, and that's how you're going to fix it. You can't just talk about changing the culture because people react to their fear for consequences. That's what teachers do. The first day of school, you lay out the rules and the consequences in your classroom, and that's how you have order.
Well, and I agree with that, and that attacks toward the FOP contract, obviously. But I don't know if anybody here read the Second City blog. I heard the laugh, so you understand. You've read it.
There might be a few people in here who write the Second City.
Look at the Second City blog. That's the most racist thing I've ever seen in my life. And you can see the culture of what goes on with police officers that feel the same way. Not our way, but the way that protects other police officers.
We don't know who writes the Second City
blog. But please, if you all have not had an opportunity to look at it, look at it.
No, but I'm saying
it's anonymous, is what he's saying.
It's all anonymous. It's all anonymous, right?
So the people who write whatever you read are police officers.
It's the most frustrating thing to read, especially maybe as a black man. I sit there and I've read it multiple times, and I just can't believe what people would write in this. And these are supposed to be police officers, right? Please, when you leave tonight, look at that, and then call me, and you'll.
First read First Tuesdays Chicago.com. Then if you have any time left, you can read Second City.
We're really trying to promote that, but we're up to three readers right now.
That's right.
And one of them is me.
We're going to keep mentioning it.
So, okay, we're going to pretend that the president of the Chicago Teachers Union is not sitting here. And so today, yesterday the teachers union said no to the contract that Mayor Rahm threw at him, and I know he literally wasn't at the table, but I call it Mayor Rahm's contract. And today, the mayor through Forrest responded by saying, what, $100 million of cuts? $100 million, is that what it was? He says, that's it. That's our best effort. We don't have any money. So,
and then the governor got into
oh,
it.
the governor.
How
was
could
like,
you forget?
Send it over to the guy who runs the water department in Flint. So, because he's done such a great job up there. So here's my question: is in the new age of the city council, are you going to engage yourself in this discussion? Because really, the issue is there money to give the teacher union a little more of what they're asking for, or are they as broke as Mayor Rahm says?
I guess the accurate question is, how much is that money going to cost us? You know, we can get the money, but it's going to cost us a lot. And Rauner, with the statement he made today, is not making it any better. Actually, it makes it a lot worse. And I think he, as a finance guy, he knew that. Oh, yeah. He did that intentionally to drive up the cost of the bonds, because they're supposed to go to market tomorrow. And he did did it last week as well. But what he did intentionally when he says he's going to try to take over, one, we know that it can't never be called. It's not going to happen. But by stating that, the bond houses in Wall Street say, well, those bonds, yeah, I may not want to, we may not want to sell any Chicago bonds. That's going to be too risky. The governor's talking about taking it over. That's all they hear. The governor's talking about taking over. And we know that governor's going, as soon as he does it, he's going to file bankruptcy, and then we're out of money. Our money is gone. Right. So it's driving up the cost of us to get the money to provide for our children. And we all have to be clear about this. This is about our children that go to public school every day. You know, we have to make sure that we have our children prepared. They go through so much, particularly children in my neighborhood, and I'm sure LaShawn's neighborhood. They go through so much in social, emotional problems before they have to learn, and they have to keep up with kids in Lincoln Park and Wicker and all these other neighborhoods. They have to try to keep up in spite of what they go through. You know, and teachers have a daunting task. It's really tough to be a teacher in my community, in certain parts of my community. I do have some 1+ schools, and I have level 3 schools. I have schools where there's, you know, these kids are out, you know, the only way they get a meal is to come to school. Clean clothes, hygiene. These kids are out here being lookouts for drug dealers and even prostituted. You know, this is real. This is not fantasy. This is real for us. And this is an everyday reality. So we want to make sure that we can get our kids educated and get them out of that culture, that climate, and move forward. So whatever we need to do together, we need to fix this. And I must say, I get a shout out to Troy LaRiviere, who I'm a big fan of yours. I read your blogs. And I look at all your stuff all the time.
More than you read his blog. More than
First
Second City
Tuesday. We need Troy to promote the blog.
That's right.
Well,
matter of fact, if you post them on the Second Tuesday blog, I'll make sure that I get them right.
He ducked the question, so I'll turn to you. The question was, is there money in some pot?
No.
You don't think the money exists in a pot?
No, not in the pot. Not in the pot, but we can get the money.
You can get the money. There's always money.
It's going to cost us more. You're right.
Okay. Well, then that leads to this question, which is one of my favorite questions. And I'll put this to you.
There is money, that financial transaction tax.
Okay.
You know, we could get that money very easily by doing that $100 billion. Well, it wouldn't. I mean, we could get it, and it would help the bond rating because people would say they have a plan.
Because I'm a big supporter of that, by the way.
Yeah.
But just try getting that through Springfield. Okay, get that Speaker Madigan. Get him to sign on to that.
It's just changing one sentence in the law, right?
That's right.
Yes, that's all it takes.
Yeah.
So here's a question for you.
Just a couple signatures too while you're at it. Easily done.
We all know that Rauner has essentially advocated as a good policy having Chicago Public Schools go bankrupt so he could turn it over to I don't know who he's going to turn it over to. Bernie Madoff. I don't know who. Anyway, and Rahm has stated that he's opposed to this. So in your humble opinion, do you believe they're at odds on this issue, or do you think this is some kind of elaborate game they're playing? Or ruse?
I think they're both are. They've already proven that they're friends, and they're playing everyone as if we're fools, and they're both making money off of the downtrodden, without a doubt, because they're making money and their friends are making money, and that's the way it's working. You know, and when you talk about the state taking over the Chicago public schools, I have to say that a couple of years ago, I put in a bill for the state to withhold the money from the Chicago public schools because it's as if they're not taking care of the needs of the kids. And more money are going toward charter schools, more money is going toward programs that we seem to not be getting a quality return for the taxpayer dollar. So, I mean, I think that the mayor should be at the table with a real plan to repair the Chicago public schools and not continue to just ask for money without a real plan to give students in the Chicago public schools quality education. You know, we can't just keep saying, give us more money.
Shawn, I have a question for you about I want to know your impressions of the governor. First of all, did he call you on your birthday?
Yes, he always calls. It's coming up. He called, my birthday is February 28th, but he always calls everyone. Dan Rutherford used to do that, but he's good at calling people to have a beer at the mansion. He might be an alcoholic. Everything is a beer. Just could be it.
You know, it's something about this stage and
Yeah,
Rauner.
you just killed the idea that Rod had to ask for another beer.
He might be an alcoholic.
Well, what's your impression of the governor? So, it sounds like you actually think he's a cordial enough guy.
Yeah.
But what is he after? What do you see?
I think he's after taking care of his friends, and I don't know how many of you are able to hang out with him, and so I don't think any of us here are, you know, so I don't think anyone in Illinois should vote for Rauner because I just don't, his interests are not for people that work, that depend on a system that you know, government. And so I just think that he should not be governor of the state.
Okay.
All right. Well, what about his? Before we open up to questions, I have to ask you about sort of his the anti-matter to Bruce Rauner, which is of course Mike Madigan. You are a member of Mike Madigan's caucus. So what's it like working under him? You were elected independently. You defeated someone who was a Mike Madigan loyalist, right? So what's your relationship like?
I mean, I think that we are lucky in the state of Illinois. I've never been more inclined to be with Speaker Madigan than I am now. If we didn't have Speaker Madigan right now, Rauner would be worse than Wisconsin. And so we're lucky to have Speaker Madigan, whether we like his shenanigans and what he's doing and how he's operating. We are lucky in Illinois to have a strong leader in Mike Madigan at the helm. Otherwise, Rauner would have his way with all his money.
Did you get a call from Mike Madigan when you introduced the recall legislation?
Actually, we met at a funeral about the recall legislation.
Not a funeral
that didn't
for
mean
the
that,
recall
right.
legislation.
That's where it's going.
Right. No, we didn't. I didn't get a call, and but we did meet at a funeral, and he told me that he's not going to stand in my way of the recall bill, but I have to prove that I could pass it, and that's all I can ask for. That's no different than any bill that we introduce in Springfield. You have to get the votes. You have to count them. He's not going to help me get 71 votes, but he's not going to prevent it, I don't think.
You believe that, really?
Well, I mean, I don't think he's going to be
serious.
I don't think he's calling members saying, you can't support that bill, stay off of it. I don't think he's doing that. I think that members are afraid just because they are afraid to support good public policy like that.
All right.
Let's have some questions. There's the that first one right there.
So, yeah, the comment is, Representative Ford, that you had said before in an interview that Mayor Emanuel, because of his ties to Washington and the federal government, could have or should have been able to get more funding for the schools, and instead he's obviously closed 50 of them and not been seen as a real friend to the schools.
Right. You know, when the mayor was running for office, you know, I'd never supported the mayor in the first election or the second election, but there was this hope in me that because he had the connections with the business community, he had the connections with the White House, he had all these connections that the city would do well. And so, I mean, but I knew that he didn't understand the city. So, right, I thought that he would understand what we needed in the Chicago public schools in order to bring the resources necessary to make Chicago have better schools.
You never saw those maps. There's a map going on where the Chicago cuts off. I know on the south side, cuts off at the Museum of Science and Industry. I don't know where it cuts off on the west side, but I think I'm sure it cuts right.
Turn it over to Harvey.
Yes. TIF money for the 6th Ward, what could it do and how do you get some?
The problem that I have with TIF money is that it's a poor replacement for real capital development in the city of Chicago. And that's the real basic problem I have with TIF money.
What do you mean by that?
Prior to TIFs, which were instituted about 30-some-odd years ago, you know, every year they had a capital development plan. They would look at the entire city and find out what was needed, and we would try to repair the crumbling infrastructure, business development, facade, rebate. All these things were part of a capital development plan. Now, when I go to the Department of Planning and say, hey, I have a great idea, and I literally did this. In my first, I had a plan for my neighborhood, State Street, 75th, Halsted, you know, and I gave them this plan, and they were like, you've really done your homework. This is great. Where's your TIF? I'm like, what do you mean, where's my TIF? This is my plan. Help me, you know, I've given you my idea of what we should do with my ward. Help me get the money. They were like, well, you don't have any real TIFs here, so, you know, those are great ideas. They're going to cost you this much money. You don't have it. Have a good day. That was my first reaction, you know, my first interaction with planning. That's back when it was called DHEAD, which was a horrible acronym, but they changed. You see, they changed it back to planning and development, right? But it was horrible. So my problem with TIF, the way it and people can talk about the opportunity for porting, but my colleagues, when they're flush with TIF money, they're not inclined to give it to me or to others, because quite honestly, I mean, we have areas that were horrible areas 25 years ago. Now they're the highest rent district in the city of Chicago, and they're still generating hundreds of millions of dollars in TIF. Areas like mine, which have little to no TIF money, and again, I keep repeating that term, stay stagnant. And I can say, hey, Alderman A, you know, you got a whole lot of TIF money over there. You mind porting some of that money over here? Now, does anybody know one of the definitions of patronage? One of the definitions of patronage, I used to keep this in my wallet a long time ago. One of the definitions I always held was patronage was kindness done with an air of superiority. So you can look, oh, you need some money, huh? I don't know, maybe, you know, and I have to come hat in hand talking to all my colleagues that have TIF money to try to get them to port money. It's a difficult, you know, thing to do, and it's hard to convince them to support my initiatives in my ward by getting some of that. Well, I was going to use that money to build another new school on top of the new school I've already built, you know, next to the high rise where the $1 million condos are, but you need it for crumbling infrastructure. I don't know. I mean, that's so, you know, and that's the conversations that it's hard.
It sounds like you're advocating depleting all the money in the reserves right now to settle this teacher dispute, and then just blow up the program completely. And I start anew.
This is starting to sound like
I get a problem. Yeah, I do, right. And I'm a big, and you know, and it's funny because my uncle is a premier TIF consultant in the city of Chicago, and he's one of the top TIF consultants in the city. And I respect him and I love him dearly, and we talk about this all the time, and we have vigorous discussions about this because I'm not a TIF fan.
Yeah.
And he's made a great success of advising on TIFs, and we talk about this, and we're trying to work out ways, but it's good in theory, but the practice is that until somebody's willing to give up some of theirs to help someone else, it's not going to work.
Okay, so let me try to paraphrase this. Essentially, you're saying it's a false dichotomy to say either cuts or, state give us a big bailout of money. And there's all these other things that the city should be doing, generating its own funds, looking at smarter management, including its use of real estate and other such things like this. So why haven't we had a higher quality conversation instead of this back and forth?
Great question. It's odd because we talk about this, and I think that CPS didn't have a really well-defined plan when we talked about this. And going back a couple of years ago when they made that decision to close the 50 schools, there was a plan in place. And I was one that was advocating for the plan because it was a state issue plan that was addressing the issue regarding the repurposing the schools. And the strange thing about it, I don't know what the ultimate part of that plan was. I was going to those meetings. They were very productive. Then the mayor came in and made his plan, and a couple of weeks later, he decided to close 50 schools, and the plan was over. The problem with it is not that he closed the schools, because some of the schools, a couple of the schools did need to be closed. A lot of those schools could have been repurposed, or we could have used those schools until such a time that we made a development plan to repurpose those schools, which was part of the state plan that the teachers union and a lot of other people were supporting. Let's work this out, talking about what's going to happen not just next year, but the next 10 years, the next 15 years. They did not adhere to that plan. They just started to slash and burn, and now we have all these vacant schools in our neighborhood that we have no idea what to do with. They're so big, even the small schools are huge. And they're in the middle of our neighborhoods, because what's going to happen then? I don't know if you ever were a kid next to an abandoned factory or something like that. What are you going to do? You're going to throw rocks at it. You're going to vandalize it. I guess it's long enough time I can tell this. Back when I was a kid, there was an abandoned factory right by our house, and as little kids do, we walked by that. I bet you can't hit that. You hit that window right there with a rock. Oh, yes, I can. Psh, and you start breaking the window. I mean, blight starts to happen. Yeah.
Just so you know, that would have happened up in Howard.
Right.
Yes, it would have happened anywhere.
So to answer your question, it's my belief that you have people that protect the special interests and the rich. The top, you have a mayor and a governor that's not willing to tax those that make more. And so you're not going to get more revenue in. So when you have someone that will not fight for a financial transaction tax, someone that's fighting against that, and someone that's not willing to fight for a progressive income tax in the state of Illinois, we're not going to get the money. And so that's why teachers are struggling, and we don't have the money, because we don't bring in the money that we need, and we don't have leaders at the top that's willing to deal with that deficit in revenue.
There's a hand waving right over here. All right, go here, and then we'll go here. Yeah. Alderman Will Burns of the 4th Ward just was reelected, of course, and then today announced I think he's leaving at the end of this week. And we have someone here who keeps applauding that, in case you can't hear it.
I think he'd be happy if he left yesterday.
Yeah, and has announced he's going to become work for Midwest Director of Airbnb, which strikes many of us as a strange transition, although maybe it's going to be a lucrative one.
Yeah,
but
a very lucrative
any
one.
thoughts? Any thoughts on this, you guys? What? I think the question here is we're not necessarily asking you to get inside Will Burns' head, but what does this mean? What does this mean for the city council? What does this mean for politics? Is this is a ripple effect or domino effect happening here?
Well, a committee does open up, so I don't know what's going to happen with that. But, Will served his community, and, I guess he found an opportunity to go into the private sector and be successful, and he took it. I know there's been some strained relationships in the 4th Ward as it relates to particularly schools and a few other things over there. So I don't know what. I can't get in his head, and I do know Will pretty well, and He did not
literally has sat in that very seat
really.
before.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I
Does that mean you're next?
and to that, no,
Go work for Uber.
right. If they didn't make the right deal, obviously what happens, right? But Uber would never hire me because I was always fighting against. I'm a big supporter of the taxi industry, so Uber would not come calling for me. So I don't believe. But I really don't know. I don't know if it's a ripple effect in the council, but I believe there are going to be some changes in the council coming up. People are concerned regarding the tough decisions that have to be made. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not planning on going anywhere. I plan to hopefully be here with the public support.
Here's I think what she's getting at, that question. Forgetting the personalities in the city council, one of the bizarre ways the city council works is that the mayor essentially selects who the chairmen are. It's supposed to be a division between houses, if you will, or powers, but the mayor controls who the chairmen are. So he effectively put a person in charge of the education committee that he could depend on to bottle up any kind of legislation that would put a cap on charter schools or elected school board. Thank you, Karen Lewis. And those Kenwood kids just
like
can't
I said,
sit there.
And I sponsored both of those resolutions, right?
Yeah, so is there a chance that, the mayor would allow somebody to sit on a committee as important as the education committee who does not agree with him on everything, who would allow these matters to come even just for a debate? Is that possible?
No.
Okay.
No.
Well, you got your answer, Vanessa.
Well, while we're on the election thing, I wonder another African American elected official who is a lot of people are scratching their heads trying to figure out what he's up to. Of course, is another former guest here, State Rep Ken Duncan, who, in case people haven't been following this storyline, wasn't present. As I was saying, wasn't present at an important vote. This was about organizing rights, correct? And he skipped that, which didn't allow the Democrats a veto-proof majority, and now basically has come out and talked about his work with Governor Rauner, and has just revealed he got $400,000 from a $500,000. Sorry, it's hard to keep up.
In addition to the 140 that Greg Goldner gave him prior to that.
Okay, so we're talking
$500,000. Finish your sentence.
$500,000 from this PAC that is run, we presume, is allied with Governor Rauner, certainly allied with his agenda in some way. What is going on with Representative Duncan? LaShawn, is there some discontent among the Democratic caucus, particularly among black members of the Democratic caucus, with the control of Mike Madigan?
Ken Duncan is one of 71, and this election would deal with the decisions that he's made. But I have to say that, we have to be fair. There's 71, and we don't have two other members not voting with the Democrats. Ken Duncan is making a decision that I obviously didn't make. He's calculating his moves, and I got to say that his voters and his constituents will deal with him, and they will either elect him again or they won't. And so when you talk about recall, here comes the recall election starting February 4th for state reps and for state officials and other people. So I think that he will see, and I think that it's always good to have independent-minded, thinking people. And I see what Rep. Duncan did. I know that what he's done, people should be more upset with Rahm and the governor.
All right. We got time for one more question. See your hand back there. The question is about two of the most prominent local offices on the primary ballot here, the state's attorney's race and the Cook County Circuit Court clerk's race. And in both of them, it appears the incumbents who have come under a lot of criticism for various reasons. Dorothy Brown in the clerk's office, Anita Alvarez in the state's attorney's office, they both had, it seemed like, decent leads right now. Although I think a lot of people were undecided in both those polls. And the question is sort of like, how do you get people to tune in and pay attention? And I think the implication of your question is kind of like, if they did pay attention, they would throw the bums out. So any thoughts on those races or about getting people to sort of tune in? Either of you guys.
As it relates to the state's attorney's office, I believe that voters will come around, and I would hope to support Kim Foxx. I know there's a large degree. There was, I think, 26% undecided, I believe, in that poll that was taken recently, that was published today. But I want to state that, like I said, I've been invested in Kim Foxx as a supporter at the very beginning. I met with her when she was contemplating running, and my chief of staff at the time and I had met with her consistently. My chief of staff had continued to volunteer in his off days and in the evenings and weekends, and now is the campaign manager for Kim Foxx. And I'd like to congratulate Brian Sleet for being there. A lot of you all know Brian. You know he's a great guy. So, I mean, for me to give up my chief of staff, who I have a great deal of respect for, and means that I'm in this race as well. So I want those that were undecided to look at the record of Kim Foxx and also look at the record of Anita Alvarez, more importantly, to see that, you know, her interest is in convictions and convictions only, not in justice. You know, justice, you know, needs to be blind, and, you know, they need to understand the interest of all that involved. So it's not just locking people up, getting people the max for minor offenses, looking at the totality of the circumstances, and I think Kim can do that. And I know people were concerned about Kim's experience. Kim served in that office for over 12 years as a seasoned trial attorney. She's, you know, served. You know, the job is primarily an administrative position, so she has run as chief of staff the county of Cook, which is much larger than the state's attorney's office. So I think she's more than capable. I think she has the right heart to do that job, and I think she will be successful. I think more people see that once we get together and rally around and get her more money so they can get the message out, and more of us that are supportive of her get the message out to our friends. I think that she will be successful.
All right. I skipped over. You had a question in the front row here a minute ago. Do you have a quick question for the panel?
If the Alderman would give us some insight about what the agenda is of the Progressive Caucus and what their vision is for the city.
Agenda of the Progressive Caucus.
Thank you. It is, you know, we do have an aggressive agenda. You know, our goal is to continue to fight for ordinances that we believe in. You know, we've been on a pretty good roll lately. So I want to thank my Progressive Caucus members. Earlier this year, we finally passed our privatization transparency ordinance, which was bottled up in committee for years and then held for years. And we're starting to get more of our agenda addressed by the administration and passed. And I want people to be aware of this real quickly, because I guess got this call the other day. They were like, more recently, you've been voting with the mayor. I said, no, let's clear this up. The mayor has been introducing our legislation, which we're voting for. You know, this is not the mayor's legislation anymore. This is more we're starting to get more and more of the Progressive Caucus initiatives and legislation brought before the council. And we're hopeful that bring more, that common sense initiatives. You know, we're going to get a little touchy with issues that we're supporting, like the financial transaction tax, which is just a resolution, but we're hoping that we can work with the state to get passed, and other initiatives that we can hope to get passed.
Do you think you can force the mayor to have a vote on an elected school board?
Again, we got to count. You know, it's up to us to count. We got to get the numbers. But I think this term we can get a vote on that.
And LaShawn, will we have a budget again in the state of Illinois?
You know, I think that the only way we're going to get a budget and really turn Illinois around if we listen to Bernie Sanders and have a political revolution. And so that's where we got to be. And but until we're able to really get people involved. We probably won't have a budget because it's not in the best interest of the governor.
All right. Get involved, everybody. Get involved. That's a takeaway here. All right. Thanks so much to our guest, Representative Ford, Alderman Sawyer. Thanks to all you guys for coming out. This is a great crowd. We'll see you again next month.